Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. We are live on channel 52, and I have with me our most special guest, our own Shaykh from ICPC Clifton, Shaykh Osamah Saleh. And he's going to be with us telling us important messages about our religion and in this time of Eid. So, thank you so much, Shaykh, for coming on channel 52 for us.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khair. It's my honor and my pleasure, and Eid Mubarak to you all.
Eid Mubarak. So I would want to know from you the most important question, as it's Eid coming, and we all know that we were not in the masajids. We prayed the whole Ramadan in our houses, and there's a lot of people asking questions about how can we pray Eid in our house, because not everybody is as proficient in reading, and Eid is one day that people who are not practicing as much, still they want to go and pray in masajid, behind the Imam and get the blessings.
Jazakallah khair. So for starters, I would say alhamdulillah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enabled us to fast the month of Ramadan, especially in these circumstances, and I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us with the reward of that. The Prophet ﷺ tells us in the hadith, لِلصَّائِمِ فَرْحَتَانِ, there are two occasions of great happiness for the one who fasts. At the time when he breaks that fast, فَرْحَةٌ حِينَ يُفْطِرُ وَفَرْحَةٌ حِينَ يَلْقَى رَبَّهُ. At the occasion in which he breaks the fast, and at the occasion in which he meets his Lord. And we pray that the one who enabled us to celebrate the first occasion of happiness, that he enables us to be a part of the second occasion of happiness, and that is when we meet him subhanahu in the hereafter. So Eid Mubarak to everyone, and I pray that Allah accepts from us our humble efforts. I know that it was a different Ramadan experience, a very unique Ramadan experience, but may Allah accept it from us with whatever it contained from good actions or from moments of negligence or laziness or weakness or deficiency. I pray that he overlooks that and judges us based on the basis of his mercy and not upon the basis of his justice. Now, about celebrating the Eid, the Eid is a great moment of happiness and celebration. And it's a beautiful thing that our deen has made our moments of celebration tied into such esteemed things relating to faith. If you look at it, the month of Ramadan is referred to as the month of patience in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, Shahrul Sabr. And the celebration of Eid is a celebration of patience, of being enabled to avoid acts of wrongdoing and to perform acts of worship for an entire month. And that's a beautiful thing that we're celebrating there. It's actually celebrating half of the spectrum of faith. When it comes to Eid al-Adha, we celebrate the other spectrum, because the scholars, they say that Eid, or I should say faith, is two halves. Half of it is patience and half of it is gratitude. And the meanings of gratitude in Eid al-Adha, the big Eid, are very evident in the sacrifice of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, and the story that we all know. So between patience and gratitude are our Eid celebrations. How to celebrate it now? During the current circumstances, you might find in your area that your masjid might be closed. But even though that is the case, that should not stop us from celebrating this date, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in his book, وَلِتُكْمِلُوا الْعِدَّةَ وَلِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ, so that you might complete the duration and so that you may say Allahu Akbar for what Allah has guided you to. There are a number of things that you can do to celebrate Eid. First off, many communities now are trying to do some form of Eid celebration, even if they cannot perform Eid in their masajid. Some areas, alhamdulillah, are able to perform the Eid prayers in their masajid or in an open space, and this is a great blessing from Allah. But for those who are unable to do that, some communities have thought of ideas like a toy drive-through or a goodie bag drive-through where people stay in their cars and celebrate the Eid. This is something that I think is a very beautiful practice. When it comes to the specifics of acts of worship on the day of Eid, it's very important to note the following. First off, when do the takbirat, when is it time to say Allahu Akbar on the day of Eid? Some scholars, they say this begins as soon as the sun sets from the last day day of Ramadan, meaning from Maghrib all the way until the Eid prayer actually commences. Some of them say it's from the morning, from Fajr time, all the way until the Eid prayer commences, and in both there is goodness. There's no problem. If you want to follow the first opinion, the former opinion, then in this case, throughout the night of Eid, you should be in a constant state of takbir, saying it a lot. In what form? There are many different forms. Some of the one that it's mentioned in the Sunnah is Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar kabira. And there's other forms that the scholars have mentioned, like Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, lillahi alhamd. And there are other versions that some later scholars added, which inshallah there's no harm in saying at all. If one knows them and has them memorized, you can say them bi'idhnillahi ta'ala without any harm. So that's for one act of worship that should be done on the night of Eid. The other thing about the night of Eid is it's a very virtuous night, because at this night Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I should say the believers should be, announcing or affirming their commitment to worship after Ramadan. I should not allow the night of Eid to pass without me doing some act of worship. It should not be Taraweeh, that's it, that's the end of it, and there's no more things to do. At least pray a few rak'ahs of qiyam. Maybe perhaps make sure you do your witr, and make sure you do some dua as a family. On the day of Eid itself, can you perform the Eid prayers together in your homes? The answer is the majority of scholars would say yes. There is a difference of opinion about it. The Hanafi school would say no, because if it was missed in congregation, then it cannot be made up alone. But the majority of scholars, they say that yes, it can be performed in the home, because it is an emphasized sunnah. It is a sunnah mu'akkada. The Hanafi school says it's a communal obligation. It's a fard kifaya. And regardless of either opinion, if you choose to perform your Eid prayers at home, then according to the opinion of the other three madhabs, then in this case you perform 2 rak'ahs, and in which you recite aloud. And in the first of these 2 rak'ahs, you do extra takbirat, motioning with your hands. Allahu Akbar, you motion after takbir, after the first takbir, Allahu Akbar, to initiate the prayers. You do it 7 times. And you don't have to say anything between each 2, but it's recommended according to some scholars to say Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. And then you recite Fatiha and then a surah. It can be any surah, it doesn't have to be a specific one, unless you have Surah Al-A'la memorized. And in this case, it's better to do that because it's a sunnah. And then in the second rak'ah, once you stand up from prostrating position, saying Allahu Akbar, you say 5 more times Allahu Akbar, with the same reasoning that I mentioned already. If you lose count, if you say it less times or more times, it doesn't affect your prayer in any way, and you could just continue onward. And then you recite Fatiha and a surah. It could be any surah, but if you have Surah Al-Ghashiyah memorized, then this is better to recite Surah Al-Ghashiyah. And that's it. After the prayer is finished, it's recommended and it's virtuous to do a reminder for the people in your home. So, I encourage for those who will follow this opinion to do this with the family. It's a beautiful opportunity and a way to celebrate the Eid, and to feel with it and make it different than any other day, as was the sunnah of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah knows best.
Takbirat should be 12 takbirat.
Yeah, so 7 in the first unit and 5 in the second, so a total of 12. Yes, that's correct. And this is aside from, again, I said the first takbirah that initiates the prayer. We call it takbirat al-ihram. And it's aside from the first takbirah when you're coming up from prostrating position, from sujood, which we call takbirat al-intiqal. So if you want to count the total, it's actually going to be more than 12, but these are the 12 extra ones. The 12 extra ones. Yeah.
Should a family prepare for Eid, or by what time should the time of Eid prayer will be expiring?
Yeah, so Eid prayer it should be done after the time of after sunrise. Okay, so after shuruq and after duha comes in, it can be performed any time after that until dhuhr prayers. It should be performed from before the Dhuhr prayers. And it could be, it doesn't have to be at any specific time between then. It could be at any time. It's open for the families to pray it at the time that they choose. Yeah. And you can continue to do takbir all the way until you actually begin the prayer. Yeah.
Okay. Another question here is about um,
Sorry, one thing. There's one thing I should also recommend. As soon as Fajr comes in, it's a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to hasten to break the fast. So make sure that you don't maintain your fast for any portion of the day, because fasting the day of Eid is haram and is prohibited. So it's recommended actually to hasten in eating something after Fajr time enters to distinguish the day of Eid from the days prior.
okay. That is a very important part. Thank you for reiterating that. Another question that we have it here is there a recommendation of a family member according to the age that they should be leading? So, for instance, a father has to lead or a son can lead the prayer.
Yeah, about the father or son leading the prayer, who the default is, it's better to have someone who is what we refer to as baligh, someone who is past the stage of puberty and is accountable for his actions. It's better to have that person lead the prayers. However, some scholars did say that there's no issue with a child leading the prayer, if it's with the approval of the parent or the father, especially if the father maybe perhaps has some difficulty in leading the prayers, or the child has special knowledge and recitation of the Quran. Then in this case, inshallah, according to this opinion, there's no issue with the child leading the prayer. Yeah.
Okay. Jazakallah khair. Another question is that if the place of worship opens up, will ICPC be hosting an Eid prayer? And if so, will they be participating in social distancing?
Yeah, so we already at ICPC we already decided what we're going to do in terms of our Eid prayers. Our Eid prayers are tomorrow, inshallah, but we're not going to be performing them on site. In fact, we already told our community that we're going to live stream it for them, but
Yeah.
we don't encourage them to follow. We're just going to live stream it for the sake of them feeling with us and perhaps hearing the khutbah and the reminder of Eid afterwards. So we're going to live stream it at 8 a.m. We're going to live stream our takbirat at 7 a.m. And at 8 a.m., we're going to live stream our prayer and encourage everyone to pray with their families at home. That's our encouragement. Please pray your Eid prayers at home with your families. And also, we're going to have a drive-through from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. for parents and families to come in their cars and pick up a gift from the masjid for their children. Yeah.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah.
Yeah.
Another question here is following an Eid prayer live is haram?
Yeah, so like according to the vast majority of scholars, following a prayer through live stream is invalid. It's not going to count because there is no jama'ah, there's no congregation that's happening. So in order for congregation to be correct, it needs to be at the same location. It cannot be through virtual means. So this is the opinion of the vast majority. There are some scholars who say otherwise, and we respect them, and we encourage that there be sort of respect of this scholarly disagreement. But at the same time, we encourage, according to the vast majority of scholars, we encourage, please do not follow a prayer through live stream.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. This was a very important clarification, because many people have been under the understanding that if there is live, we can just follow and pray.
Yeah.
So another question is, when do you have to give fitra and zakah, and why is it important to give before Eid prayer, if it is?
Yeah, so about Zakat al-Fitr. Zakat al-Fitr is an obligation that is for the entire family. In fact, Zakat al-Fitr is even required upon those who are actually needy. According to the majority of scholars, they say that zakat al-fitr should be given on the behalf of everyone who has the sustenance for a day and night. Zakat al-fitr was legislated when Ramadan was legislated, when the obligation of Ramadan was, which is in the second year after Hijrah. And the reason why it was legislated, as the Prophet ﷺ tells us, is twofold. It is tuhra للصائمين من اللغو والرفث. It is a cleansing for the fast from any acts, any deficiency that was in the month, any wrongdoing that was in the month. So it cleanses the fast on one end. As is the meaning of zakat in Arabic language linguistically. Zakat purifies, right? So
Mhm.
zakat al-fitr purifies your fast. And the other thing is to provide some type of assistance to those in need on the day of Eid. As the Prophet ﷺ said, relieve them of needing to ask, especially on this day, especially on the day of Eid. So that's why we give zakat al-fitr. When should it be given? It can be given anytime throughout the month of Ramadan, but now Ramadan is winding down. So according to one opinion, it's any time during the month, and there's other opinions that say a day or two before Eid. And regardless, now is the time to give it. You should not delay any further. You should give it now before Eid prayers commence. And especially since we're not going to be praying in Jama'ah and congregation in our Eid prayers in our personal community, please hasten to give it. And there's so many different ways that you can give it out to those in need. Yeah.
Okay, so the question about zakat is that how can I how can I know that how much do I have to give for my zakat? And if I own a house, would that be considered or added in the zakat because everybody pay mortgage and houses belongs to the banks?
Yeah. Okay. So you're asking about zakah now, not zakat al-fitr, correct?
Yeah.
In terms of general zakah, the way it is calculated is it is for the individual to maintain a minimum threshold. That minimum threshold is called nisab for an entire year. And the nisab, the way it's calculated according to the hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ, is it is the value of 85 grams of gold. And of course, because we deal with dollars here, we don't deal with gold. The way we calculate it is we see what's the cost of 1 gram of gold in the market today. Now, when I'm supposed to pay my zakah, you're going to find that it's about $55. You're going to multiply that 85 by that 55. You're going to come out with an estimate of $4,500 or $4,600. That's the minimum threshold. What does this minimum threshold do? This minimum threshold, it defines who is well off and who is poor in terms of the fiqh ruling of zakah. Now, if you have this minimum threshold for a year, that means you are from the aghniya in terms of fiqh, and you need to pay zakat to those in need. If it dips underneath this minimum threshold, even for a day, then your zakah year is cut off, and you're going to start a new year, a new zakah year, as soon as you get the minimum threshold once again. Now, say you have that minimum threshold for an entire year. What are you going to calculate in terms of your zakah? So, say if you had your zakah, you got the minimum threshold in May. Next year, May, your money fluctuated throughout the year. You had 5,000, it went up to 20,000, then it went down to 15,000. Then by the end of the year, next year, May, you had
Mhm.
$50,000 in your bank account. What are you going to give zakah for? You're going to give zakah for $50,000. You don't need to have the money in your possession for an entire year. You need to have the minimum threshold, at least in your account for an entire year, to be considered someone who is well off in terms of fiqh. That you would give zakah on that's $50,000. That's 2.5%. That's going to be, for zakah. So if you had for $100, $2.5 would be $2.50. For $1,000, it'd be $25. For $10,000, it'd be $250. Right? For 10,000. So for 20,000, it's going to be $500, and so on and so forth. So it's a very minimum amount and this is obligatory zakah. Now, what do you calculate in this amount? You're going to calculate your money, whatever you have, if you have it in your checking account, or if you have it in your home, or you have it invested in the stock market, if hopefully if you invested in halal options, or wherever it might be. You don't include in this calculation assets. Like, for example, you have assets that are for personal use, I should say.
Well, jewelry,
Say, huh?
is jewelry considered your personal assets?
Yeah, I'm going to get to that right now. So, say for example, the person asking the question is asking about a home.
Mm-hmm.
Do you include your home in the calculation of zakah? The answer is absolutely not. The only time you would include real estate in zakah calculations is if you're buying to sell. If you're buying to sell, then this is a different story. This is like a business for you. So you're going
Okay.
to include it in special zakah. But if it's only for your personal use, and same thing with your car, and same thing with any other asset that you have for personal use. When it comes to jewelry, there's a difference of opinion among the scholars. The majority of scholars, they say if jewelry is for personal use and in minimum in amounts that are normally used to wear for for occasions and so on and so forth, then the majority of scholars, they say that you're not going to pay zakat on the jewelry if it's for personal use. Now, if someone buys jewelry to save money, like they invest their money in gold or in jewelry as a means to protect their wealth, and they'll sell it at a future date, then in this case, of course, they're going to pay zakat on that wealth. The Hanafi school requires paying zakat on jewelry under certain circumstances, and in this case, when you calculate zakat for jewelry, you're only going to give it on the amount of pure gold in your possession, or silver, pure gold or silver. But you're not going to give it on the actual value of the. You might have bought like a necklace that costed thousands of dollars because of the craftsmanship that's in it. You're
Mm-hmm.
not going to consider that craftsmanship in terms of zakah. You're not going to pay zakah on diamonds or anything of the sort. It's only on gold and silver. From the jewelry, and only on the pure gold and pure silver. So you would need to take it to a jeweler to appraise it and give you the actual amount of pure gold that's in this item. So say if between all of your jewelry you have 100 grams of gold, what you would do in this case is you're going to multiply 100 grams of gold times the value of 1 gram of gold, which is, I said, as $55 in the market today. So that's going to give you $5,500. You're going to add that 5,500 to the rest of the wealth you have, and you're going to give zakat based on that. Allah.
Okay. Okay. Another question here is, what is the difference between zakah and zakatul fitr? And what are the penalties on each if you have not paid for 5 plus years?
Yeah, so when it comes to zakat al-fitr is exclusive for Ramadan. This is, as I said, to cleanse the fast from any wrongdoing or mistakes or negligence that was in it. And it's also to give minimum assistance to those in need on the day of Eid. So that's what zakat al-fitr is. They also refer to it as sadaqat al-fitr. There's different names for it. But it's also a required charity. And of course, if someone doesn't give it by the end of the day of Eid, then they have fallen into sin. And if the time frame it's due passes, you still have to give it. All right. So that's the consequence of it, is you've fallen into sin. Especially when it comes to the issue of zakat al-mal, our Sunnah and the Quran tells us that there is a severe punishment for those who don't give the zakah in their wealth. As the Quran says, وَالَّذِينَ يَكْنِزُونَ الذَّهَبَ وَالْفِضَّةَ وَلَا يُنْفِقُونَها فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ فَبَشِّرْهُم بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. Those who do not give, or those who keep and stow away the gold and silver and do not give it in the way of Allah, then give them tidings of a painful punishment. So it's a very severe thing, and the Sunnah actually mentions that on the day of judgment, the individual who did not give his zakat of his wealth will come in the form of a snake, and it will wrap around his body, and it'll crush his bones, and it'll say, "Ana maluk, ana kanzuk." I am your wealth. I am the treasures you chose to store away and not give the rights of the needy in your wealth. So. it's a major sin not to give zakah. Now, if someone did not know this for the past years, then it's okay. Then now we try to work on fixing the issue. We're going to go back and try to calculate for years prior. And you might need the assistance of someone who's a person of knowledge in this case. And I encourage you to do that, because the rights of the needy aren't going to just drop with the passage of time. Even if that's 1 year or 5 years or 10 years, it doesn't matter. I need to try my best and exert my efforts in trying to make sure that I give this debt that is owed to the needy.
Yeah, so hey, you're right. We no point of dwelling on our past. We can always fix from here. And I appreciate the person who asked that question. The next question is actually not on Eid, but it's a different topic. But I would ask because it's Salam. I wanted to know, bank job is halal or not?
In terms of working at a bank, so the finance industry in general, for us as Muslims, there are a number of things that, or I guess you could say, are obstacles in the way of working in the finance industry, mainly because the cornerstone of the economy that in the time that we live in is interest. And of course, by us, interest is one of the fatal sins. As it's one of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that the Quran says فَأْذَنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, that there's such a severe sin for one who engages in interest. And the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ says that this is applicable to the one who gives interest, the person who takes interest, and the one who witnesses upon it, and the one who writes the contract, the interest bearing contract down. It applies to all of them. Hum fil ithmi sawa, as the hadith mentions. So it's a severe sin. It's not something that we should take lightly. And the reason why it is because it gives room for financial injustice to happen between people, and Islam doesn't want that to happen in society because it'll lead to corruption of the society. And this is very noticeable, especially like in some of the loans that someone might take that are for 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years. Instead of the amount that you take, instead of paying the amount that you've taken, you end up paying back the amount multifold. It increases exponentially. So this is why, and there's many other things that I could say about the reason why interest is prohibited in Islam. But anyway, regardless, getting to the question now, when it comes to working in the finance industry, there are different job positions. And there is job positions that directly deal with interest-bearing contracts. That's like working as a teller at a bank. You're actually facilitating or working in real estate, mortgages and stuff like that. The closer you are to actually dealing with the interest, the more problematic it gets. But say if you're doing something at a bank that absolutely has nothing to do with the interest-bearing contract, like say if you're a security guard or you work in IT or something of the sort, on a technical level, there is some issue in you helping facilitate the banking activities of the bank. But most scholars, they say, if what you do does not relate to the actual prohibited item directly, then it's okay for you to work in this. So what does that mean? Like it would be okay for you to be a security guard. It would be okay for you to work in IT. This is the opinion of the majority of scholars today, because if we're going to deal with it at such a technical level, then basically people aren't going to work, because there's always some element of doubt and some type of financial activity that happens today. Not always, I should say, usually or mostly, wherever you're going to work. So Allah Alam.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. Next question is, for those people that don't know how to pray, can they follow along on the web stream? I think we already covered that.
Yeah. So I think the way I would encourage people to do this is look, when I was telling our community during Ramadan, we should not reduce our Ramadan experience to prayers, because there's so many other acts of worship that are very virtuous that are just as important for us to do. And I gave examples like reflection, like reading the translation and reflecting on the verses, or making dua, or doing dhikr, or some other act of goodness, giving charities. There's so many other things. We should not reduce a Ramadan experience to Taraweeh. But in any case, just to answer the question, for those who don't know how to pray, our advice is that the better and more optimal thing to do is at least learn the basics of prayer from someone. And if you want, reach out to anyone, that we can send you a book about how to pray, the
Mhm.
basic things. And you might not know how to recite a lot. Well, I can't recite like this qari or that qari,
Mhm.
and that's fine. It doesn't need to be a very long prayer. Even if you recite from Fatiha, just even al-Fatiha or a small chapter of the Quran, it's okay. It's sufficient. It doesn't need to be something very long, or as I said to my community, no one has everything and everyone has something. No one has everything, everyone has something. Perhaps Allah has given a person the ability to recite, and another person doesn't have that ability, but the other person has another way to get closer to Allah Azza wa Jal. So I would say that would be my advice in that question. Wallahu alam.
Another question is, should a man calculate his wife's income with his to see how much zakat they need to give, or does the husband and wife do zakat separately?
Yeah, it's better to do it separately because especially if they're both separately accountable for paying their zakah. So it's easier for the calculation, and to make sure that everyone's giving the right due upon them. Calculate it separately. Don't calculate it together unless there's some shared ownership, like you guys own a business together. And in this case, we could even separate it easily to. You don't need to have it together. But so Allah alam. So I would encourage you to do it separately.
Okay. Is it halal to earn through Wall Street investment?
Well, like investing in stock market and stuff, you mean?
I don't know. The question he is only this, so I'm sure it must be leading towards stock market because Wall Street is famous towards stock.
Yeah. So when it comes to the stock market, it's much less controversial than the bonds market. The bonds market is very problematic because it's a debt based structure. You're profiting off of debt. And in Islam, that's very, very problematic because when you give someone money and you profit off of the money, that's exactly what riba is. So, and as it's said in the hadith, كل قرض جر نفعا فهو ربا. Every loan that begets some type of benefit for the one giving it and issuing it, then it is a form of riba. So by us, loans are not profitable ventures. So the bonds market, I would tell you, stay clear of that unless it's going to be in the form of some sukuk. Sukuk, it needs some time to explain what sukuk are. I'll leave that for another time. But in terms of the stock market, the issue with the stock market is you need to be careful of where you're investing in. It needs to be a socially responsible investment on one end. It can't be something that conflicts with Islam. It can't be in like alcohol. It cannot be in some other type of industry that is fully haram to deal with. But if it's in something that's not haram, then when you invest in stocks, it's like you're becoming a partial owner in a business. And as long as there's no riba and there's no interest involved in like the portfolio management and the rest, then there's no issue with investing in the stock market. Again, some halal options that I encourage you to look into are like amana funds or wahid invest, or there's some or azad. There are some halal options for investment that they already relieve you. Where should I invest? You don't know what to do it? Go look at some of the Islamic investment options in the stock market, and it'll relieve you from all of this. Go to Azad, the Amana, or Wahid Invest, or some of the other ones that you might have heard of in your locality. Allah Alam.
Okay. Sheikh, we're getting so many questions, but I know we're getting closer to our time. One last question I'm going to ask, but I'm getting so many good questions. The question is that if someone miss fasting, they pray fidya, do they still make up the missing fasting later on?
Yeah, well, it depends why they missed the fast. If they, so if someone who doesn't fast due to illness, they don't pay fidya. If someone due to temporary illness, so what they have to do is make up the day. Like if someone got a fever and they couldn't fast for a day or two or three, they have to make up the day. When do we pay fidya? The fidya is paid for two main types. One is for someone who's chronically ill or elderly. This is a person who's unable to fast and they will never be able to fast because of their special circumstances. In this case, you pay fidya, which is approximately $10 per day on behalf of each day that wasn't fasted. and that's the replacement. The other scenario in which fidya is mentioned is for the pregnant or breastfeeding woman, and this is opinion of difference of among the scholars. So some scholars, they say when a pregnant or breastfeeding woman chooses to not fast, she has the rukhsa and the dispensation not to fast, then we're going to see what's the situation. Did she break her fast due to fear for her own well-being? Then in this case, she's going to be considered just like the temporary ill. She only has to make up the days and nothing else. If she
Okay.
broke her fast because the doctors told her about her the fetus is going to be at risk or in danger, then in this case, the scholars, they say, or at least I should say, some of the scholars, they say that she's going to have to make up the day plus fidya for each day that wasn't fasted. But again, this is difference of opinion. According to the Hanafi school, there is no concept of fidya for the pregnant and breastfeeding woman. All you would have to do is make up the day.
Okay. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. I know the half an hour just flew, and there's so many questions coming, and we really need to know more. Half an hour is not enough. There's one last question, which I really think, I know we are running out of time, but because it's linked to the Eid, I want to ask that question. Someone has asked that, can I pay my zakat towards a mosque construction, or it has to be given to the needy?
Okay, so this is also, again, like as many things are in fiqh, there are multiple opinions about. So historically speaking, the Quran tells us that there are specific categories that are zakat eligible. And one of these categories is titled fi sabilillah, and in the way of Allah. Historically speaking, in the way of Allah, this would be the Muslims at the front lines and at the corners of the Muslim state, just to protect those areas. It'd be for the Muslim armies and so on and so forth. That's what it was. But in modern day, many of the scholars, they say that fi sabilillah and in the way of Allah should also include those who further the cause of Islam through da'wah. And that would include especially masajid in the West. The Islamic institutions in the West, they are like beacons of guidance for people. Many people accept Islam through these places. So this is opinion of many scholars today, that you can give it to the construction of a masjid, or to paying off the remaining balance on a masjid, from your zakat al-amwal, because it is serving a general cause. The same thing would be applied to a non-profit, the Islamic education place, or something of the sort, because it's furthering the message of Islam in your locality.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. So thank you so much, Sheikh, for coming, and I hope that we can have you again. And next time we will have you for a longer time, because there were so many questions. So thank you, viewers, for watching us and joining us. And Sheikh, if you have any last messages for us, especially giving us your time during this difficult time of Eid and different time of Eid, so your last words.
Jazakumullah khair. It's truly my pleasure. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all, and I'm happy to be with you, and I'd be happy to visit you again. And I pray that you all enjoy the Eid day tomorrow with your families, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us to witness Ramadan next year together in our masajid. Jazakumullah khair.
Inshallah. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for tuning us. And if you have any questions, I know that there were questions, we will be sending the answers back. Jazakallah khair. Thank you.